Hey guys, this is CSDX, but you can call me Sean. Hey, look what I can do. Did it work? So back in the 80s and 90s, we had TVs that weren't flat like pancakes called CRT TVs, aka tube TVs, cause I guess this counted as a pipe or something. They were usually nowhere near as big as the TVs we got today for the most part, and some of them were even tiny and used an antenna for service. It sucked, but it was all we had. Back in the day as well, video games, as you probably already guessed by now, also were largely 8-bit and 16-bit using pixelated graphics. But for those youngins that have tried out certain older games these days, they probably noticed the jagged edges and such on the graphics. Well, that's because the games were made with CRT TVs in mind, as they had to design it so that when played on said TV, it'd look more smooth and clean, because that's how the screen was for some reason. This was also a bit of the case with the N64, Sega Saturn, and PS1 titles. Man, there was a lot more effort put into the visuals than one would believe if they were raised in a swamp. In fact, this was also the case for handheld games, as the LCD screens and handhelds such as the Game Boy, Game Gear, and the GOAT known as the Game Boy Advance, they also had to keep that type of screen in mind when making the visuals on these systems too. So lately I've actually had a bit of a renewed interest in CRT filters, LCD filters, etc. for older games, so I thought why not take a look at some older games, or even just like releases of compilations, re-releases of games and so on and so forth, official ones at that, and check out the CRT filters and LCD filters, and I guess judge them how they look and see if they hold up or not. Starting with Sonic Origins, this is the 4th time I've talked about this game this year alone. I cannot escape it! Well, this is awkward. Turns out the game has something called anti-aliasing, which, to try to sum it up, is largely just another way to smooth out the pixels in a game without having the CRT scan lines doing the job. If nothing else, you've likely seen this in the options of a few big PC games, which makes sense as the settings for those types of games are more varied compared to consoles. Same goes for the Game Gear titles, which I've already complained about before the Plus DLC launched, so if you want to check that out when you're done with this video, and as long as I can remember to put it there, click or tap the note up here to check it out after the video is over. Just in case, I'll also link it in the description below. But you know what's funny about this? Sonic Mania has CRT filters. Like, 2 of them. And the crazy thing is, it's not even needed to make it look any better or any smoother. Like, it's not needed at all. Seriously, I'm looking at each of these filters from none, clean, CRT soft, and CRT sharp as closely as possible, and I swear I don't see any sort of difference in the pixels. I can see the CRT fuzz, but that's really about it, so if anything, it's just scan lines put in the game just for the hell of it. Well, next let's take a look at Castlevania Anniversary Collection's little CRT filters on the Xbox. Oh yeah, that's right, I sold my Xbox. I wonder how long it'll be until I get it back. Well, on the plus side, the scan lines filter looks great with Castlevania 1. It's a decent fuzz, but it still looks super clean. I'd argue that all that's missing is a tube TV layout, but I don't exactly mind the lack of it, because I know if I set it up just once, I won't want to play any other older game without it. Weirdly though, the LCD filter for the Game Boy games is just dot matrix, and I'm sorry, the green on this makes it look so friggin' ugly. Why can't we have the LCD filter without it looking like snot? Scan lines work well with it, interestingly enough. By the way, see this screenshot? See how the scan lines look more blatant? Yeah, zoom it out. This was how it looked on OBS Studio, because the preview window was roughly this size. I've had this issue on my PS5, which we'll get to in a moment, as one game had a filter that looked awful on my TV, though it turned out that it was cause the PS5 was set to 4K, and I set it to 1080p, and it looked like much better. 4K is stupid, ray tracing is stupid, HDR is stupid, Jupiter is stupid. Oh, what about Castlevania Advance Collection? Hell yeah, the Game Boy Advance is my favorite console of all time. Let's see how they made it perfectly. They fucked it all up. Are you fucking kidding me? So we only got 3 options. Standard, Pixel Perfect, and Full. Pixel Perfect is just a pussy's way of doing it. It crunches the screen sides a bit to try and simulate what it looked like with the LCD filter, but I'm not the biggest fan. Okay, I actually don't mind it all that much. I just am mad that there is no LCD filter alteration. Let me guess. They didn't cut corners with Dracula X.
Hey, go fuck yourself.
Well, let's look at some filters as part of PS Plus Premium. Might as well while I'm still sub to it. Let's start with Ape Escape. Also, seeing the file name that I chose with no spaces, I can see why categories called it Ape Escapey. I've been meaning to try this game out, honestly. Well, I think one thing's obvious. I suck at this game. Not a fan of how it controls, but that's besides the point. As for the CRT filter, I just barely notice scan lines if I look hard enough, but it does smooth it all out either way. There's also the modern filter, which I assume from what I'm seeing is just anti-aliasing, going by how it just looks like Retro Classic, the CRT filter's name that is, but without the scan lines. What about the LCD filter for PSP games? Well, Medieval Resurrection looks like the best example to use, and this has multiple filters. Modern, Classic Arcade, Modern Arcade, and Default. No joke, the biggest difference between Classic Arcade and Modern Arcade is that Classic Arcade looks a tad more saturated in color, like purple for some reason, but only in the preview, not so much in the gameplay itself. That's especially confusing. It does smooth it out well either way. By the way, very interesting thing to note, when I tried out Medieval Resurrection for the first time on PS5, it ran at a fluid 60 FPS, and I wasn't sure if the subtitles were synced properly with the gargoyle because of the frame rate, but then when I went back to try and check one day, Medieval Resurrection got an update, and then it started running at 30 FPS. I feel like the 60 FPS wasn't a big issue. Why'd you fix it by having the frame rate and hurting the response time? What the hell? Well, while we're still on my PS5, let's look at the CRT filter for Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. Believe it or not, this was the game that had the CRT filter look genuinely awful, as it looked a lot more fuzzy than it should have and the colors seemed very washed out, which sucks because otherwise this filter looks so damn good, and that works out because Final Fantasy 1 and 4 are two of my favorite RPG games ever, let alone two of my favorite Final Fantasy games ever. Though, for whatever reason, at least specifically with the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters CRT filter, it doesn't look very good on the OLED. I even double checked to be sure if it was specifically when the colors are vivid, because there's a setting on here that lets it go from vivid to standard if you, for whatever reason, don't want the colors to be all vibrant and such, and you prefer them to be a bit more washed out. I don't know why you would want that, but more power to you, and it actually looks better, the CRT filter that is, on the OLED Switch when it's set to standard. When it's vivid, it feels a bit too fuzzy, interestingly, kind of like how it was when it was in 4K on the PlayStation, at least. It's very confusing, I guess it's his word. I would argue is also because it's a small screen in its own right, just like how I mentioned earlier with the example with Castlevania Advance Collection, or Anniversary Collection, sorry. But here's the thing, on my Steam Deck, even with Vibrant Deck, even with the night mode off, the CRT filter looks perfectly fine, and I don't understand why that is. I don't have a segue for this. Here's Mega Man Legacy Collection 1. This compilation has two specific filters, TV and monitor. TV, this is the best CRT filter I've seen out of all of these so far. It not only looks near perfect IMHO, but it even has the occasional flicker. I love that it has that effect. Capcom really knew what they were doing here. As for monitor, seems like it's just a TV filter but without the random flicker. So if the flicker even bothered you, this is a good alternative. Let's keep the Mega Man train rolling with Legacy Collection 2 and Mega Man 7. It's barely noticeable again, but it does seem to smooth things out. I'm not too sure. Let's check with 8. Damn, I still can't exactly tell. Well, we got NES-style games in 9 and 10, so let's try it out here. Oh my god, there's literally no difference. No, I even checked to be sure. The CRT filter makes zero difference. It's just very faint scan lines to create an illusion. What about the X Legacy Collection? Oh god, no. So they got anti-aliasing, that's fine and dandy, but the CRT filter also doesn't do a damn thing. It doesn't smooth out the pixels, it just drops a Photoshop layer on the game. What the hell is the point of giving us a scanline filter if it doesn't do a fucking thing? Why do you look like you got mugged by Brock Lesnar? Battle Network Legacy Collection, you're my only hope. My hope is dead. You got it perfect in the first Legacy Collection. What the fuck even happened since then? Okay. What about, I don't know, Collection of Mana, I guess? I will admit I'm not the biggest fan of the Mana games, specifically Secret of Mana, due to the meter system. I consider the one in Final Fantasy Adventure just fine. I like the one in Sword of Mana, which I think was taken from Legend of Mana, which I also think was taken from Trials of Mana. I'm not too sure, I haven't checked yet. And I feel like that meter system in question was perfected by that point. But let's see how it goes. Oh, that's nice. So with Final Fantasy Adventure, we got black and white but small, color but small, ugly green with LCD filter because I guess LCD filters aren't allowed to exist unless it looks like puke, and ugly green with LCD filter, I'm not repeating all that, but small. Why even bother, Squinks? Well, what about Secret of Mana? We got big, and we got slightly less big. That's it. No scan lines, no anti-aliasing, no nothing. Same goes for Trials of Mana. Well, at least they learned from this for the Pixel remasters. Speaking of, when are the PC and mobile versions getting the console enhancements? It's been 6 months! In fact, why won't you give controller support to the mobile versions, for crying out loud? Okay, I should have seen this coming, actually. Some companies are just too incompetent to put in a proper CRT or LCD filter and whatnot. Now, I could go on for a while with other games, but I don't know if I own enough games right now to really see more of the CRT and LCD filters and so on and so forth, even though we've mostly seen CRT filters lately. But if you want to see more videos like these, let me know and I'll see what I can do about that. With that said, I thought I'd end this with probably the second best ones on here. I forgot about Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 CRT filter there. And that would be the filters on the Nintendo Switch Online apps. Seriously, another part I'm doing this video in the first place is because the review that I'm supposed to be working on isn't ready yet. In fact, it's nowhere near ready. But at least it's fun to talk about this stuff, right? These are done so damn well, not just with NES and SNES, but I ended up getting lost in the fun with Streets of Rage 2 on the Genesis NSOs. I didn't write that part. I usually played the first one, and this was my first time properly playing the second one, so I got more footage than I felt was really needed because, like, I was having too much fun. Sorry about that. As for Nintendo 64, for whatever reason, they just decided to clean the models up with no option for a filter at all, which sucks because I remember Chuck Conroy praising how the snowy area of Paper Mario looks on a CRT TV and was disappointed to find out that N64 NSO has no filters at all. It was so disappointing. With Game Boy though, well, first off, it's not called an LCD filter, but it's called, and I quote, reproduce classic feel. Was LCD filter trademarked or something? Also, it seems to mess with the frame rate a bit, I have no idea why. But Game Boy Advance NSO, it smooths out the pixels, isn't distracting at all, it doesn't sacrifice frame rate like with some Game Boy games, it's perfect in every way, just like the Game Boy Advance. I highly recommend it if you ever opt to pay for the expansion pack on the Nintendo Switch Online service. And with that, we are done for the day, we are done with this video, the algorithm is hopefully appeased, especially since monetization rules have been changed, but instead of, making them more fair to the content creator, they decided to make it even harder by adding an entirely separate tier. Like, there's gotta be some sort of limit to how much YouTube can screw this up. YouTube, what the fuck is wrong with you? No, actually, seriously, what the actual fuck is wrong with you? Why are you like this? Why do you hate us? Why in general?